My guest for this episode is creativity and innovation expert James Taylor. In this conversation, we will explore super collaboration, the art of humans and machines working together to achieve extraordinary results. We do a deep dive into the mindset shifts, ethical considerations, and practical strategies leaders need to thrive alongside artificial intelligence. You won't want to miss this discussion.
Welcome to Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. We'll explore the power of potential and the promise of self-leadership. Join Andrew, a global leadership expert and author, as he shares insights, strategies, and stories spanning 25 years in 40 countries. Together, we'll unlock what makes us human, harness technology wisely, and step boldly into the future of leadership.
Well done on your latest show reel. Well, the first question is, okay, you've been talking about AI and collaboration. Where have you seen it working well?
So we should probably first start by why it hasn't been working well for many organizations. 70% of organizations that use artificial intelligence start to use AI in the work of the organization or with their teams or their people. Those initiatives get stuck in the pilot phase. They never move beyond the pilot phase. And when they look into the reason why that's happening and why most projects never move beyond the pilot, so they never really add value to the customers or the clients or the people that work in the organization, it's almost like a Pareto principle going on. Basically, only 20% of the reasons why it fails and it's not being really used well and adding value is because of the technology. The vast majority, the 80% of the reason is the people and the playbooks that they're running in their heads, and that kind of really stopping them from doing the work. So with AI and the human and machine AI kind of side working together, everyone immediately jumps into the tech piece. But actually, you kind of have to take a bit of a pause and actually look at what's going in the minds of the people in the organization and why it's not working. So usually when you break that down, you look at why are people not doing it well, and what the playbooks they're playing in their head. Part of it is inertia. They just I'll get around to it, I'll do it. That's part of it. The other part is they're scared that it's going to take their jobs or their roles, or it's going to reduce their salary in some way. So companies like in Europe, like Klarna, for example, have been looking at ways to say, listen, we're going to reduce our headcount every year by 10% because people leave all the time. But what we're going to do is replace some of those roles with AI. So the people that stay, we're actually going to increase their salaries, increase their remuneration. So that's one of the ways that you get around it.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but using Klarna is an interesting case study because Klarna kind of went in boots first, right?
Yeah,
and really embraced AI, but they seem to have reversed course and said we may have let too many humans go, and that human interaction is not there, and we're now trying to hire back some of the people we let go. Is that not the case?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that happened. So they were the tip of the spear in terms of what was going on. They went, that's it. We're going to go full on steam ahead. And lots of companies just kind of sat then and watched and okay, let's watch this and see how it goes. And so in their case, and I think you're going to start to see this a little bit more as time goes on, because in the same way that a lot of the things that we used, 10 years ago with e-commerce, like Uber, for example, Uber was super cheap. I could get an Uber ride for $3 or something, really cheap. And now that same ride costs $100. Why is the difference in that? Is because loads of money was coming in from venture capital and companies to basically subsidize the cost of those technologies and those platforms. The same thing is going on with AI. So what I think you'll also find is some organizations will absolutely charge in, say, that's right, we're going to get rid of 40% of our workers and we're just going to replace them with AI. That may work from a cost perspective early on, but as AI the price of it starts to increase, and you're already starting to see this, people might have to go, actually, that cost saving isn't quite as big. So there is another reason, and so that's what I believe is actually the more important reason why organizations should be trying to win their people over to using AI, and that is the intrinsic reasons, not the extrinsic, not the salary, the remuneration. And there was a study that just came out. You can check it on Harvard did the study. And they found that those individuals and teams that were using AI were much more productive than those that weren't. Nothing particularly surprising. That just backs up Boston Consulting Group and other research that's been done. But what they found is that those individuals who are using AI were actually happier in their work. And those humans that were working with other people, other humans, and AI, they were the happiest of them all. So I actually think that the way that we should be talking to a lot of organized and people now is really talking about this as a potential for human flourishing, for the intrinsic, the kind of happiness bit. That bit doesn't get talked about because it's not quite as like sexy as the tech side. But I think that's the opportunity. And obviously, loads of jobs will disappear during this time. That's not particularly new, but there'll be lots of new things that will be created, and you'll see this. I think the trick is going to be ensuring that the horse of change that's coming through doesn't trample on you. You can actually just ride on the back of that horse instead. So I'm kind of optimistic. I think companies like Klarna, obviously very kind of early on, just trying to start to use this. I think you'll then start to find a bit of an equilibrium in terms of how this is working and how organizations are starting to do it. And maybe the headcount saving might be not as big as they thought it was going to be. But what it's real, and I think this is the company's idea with most of the time. Now you really have where the rubber hits the road, and they're thinking about, okay, what does this actually really need to look like for our people to be using these technologies well and to be collaborating with this in the way that I talk, like kind of super collaboration way.
Okay. There's another case study which has gone the sort of more balanced way, and that's Moderna, the pharma biotech company, who's actually just merged the chief people officer and the chief technical officer role into one person. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with that case?
No. I mean, I saw that kind of thing happening a little bit earlier with chief marketing officers. The number of organizations with large Fortune 500 companies with chief marketing officers now has decreased, because the chief marketing officer role also kind of got subsumed into the chief technology officer, and basically, software is eating the world. I think you probably start to, I can imagine you'll see that maybe in the chief people officer. I think that could be a mistake. It feels like that's not the smartest way to go, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, obviously, Moderna, they put a huge amount into R&D in what they're doing, all the protein folding and all the pharmaceuticals. So maybe they've just made a calculation that's going to be best for them. I think it'll be an interesting experiment. I think it's a slightly dangerous road to go down.
I think it's fairly rare that the skill sets for CTO and CPO are very different, and I think they'd have to find a fairly rare individual that has the mindset across both. But we'll see how that works out. I mean, that's one to watch. So in terms of collaboration,
probably if you did the psychometrics of those CTOs and the CPOs, it's going to be such different psychometrics as a general rule. And obviously, you work with a lot of CPOs and CTOs, and often CTOs come from a more data background. That's what excited them about doing the work that they do. Maybe they came from engineering backgrounds, where the CPOs tend to come more. There's maybe a higher empathy level there as well. So I think, I don't know, it feels like that's kind of just a bit odd. It's a kind of had that mix.
Right. So in terms of super collaboration, what is the mindset that people have to have? If we take the premise that teams that actually include an AI agent as a team member are happier and more productive, is that the way we frame it? Is to see the agent as a team member?
Yeah, so I think what you'll find, you're talking like singular agent. I think where we'll end up and where we're going already is agents plural. So you as an individual will have hundreds, an entire army of agents working for you. Some of them are doing very different types of roles. Maybe you have one that's a coaching agent, another one that's your kind of chief marketing officer, an SEO. There's all these different roles that they're going to have. So I think what you're starting to see now is you might almost have an agent who kind of sits as your consigliere in mafia terms, or your chief, your chief officer that you have, whose then job is to divide up all these different tasks. So now this is like the agentic side that we're going to. So I think that relationship will be very important, because that agent that you're using for that is almost acting as the conductor of all the other agents that are going to be working for you and making those helping make those decisions. But very broadly, what you're finding with individuals is there's two groups as they kind of start to divide themselves off on the human side. So you have what we call cyborgs and centaurs. So the cyborg is just that individual who feels very comfortable with these technology and constantly intertwining everything that they do with AI, constantly refining and molding. It's like the guitar player that has a guitar. It's just kind of part of an extension of who they are. And they don't even think about that. I think that is going to be the case. I see already with younger generations under 18, 16, where they're using voice as their primary way of natural language of talking with AI. And they're almost treating it as a coach, a life coach, and just as someone that's helping them get through life and someone that's get through life. So that's one, the centaur. The other one is like
Sorry,
the
I just have
cyborg role.
to open
Yeah,
the pod bay doors. How? Right? Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So cyborgs,
So the cyborg is there,
AI
and
native.
we can get into the ethics of that because there are very troublesome things going on in the ethics of it. Then the centaur, essentially that individual, let's say you, and you look at a project, something that you want to try and do, and you decide, okay, these are the tasks or the sub projects that I'm going to have the human teams focus on, and these are things that the AI is going to focus on. And they're basically kind of working together. So you're building like very kind of collaborative human and machine teams. Whereas I think that cyborg idea, where you'll start to see is I anticipate within the next 5 to 10 years, you will see the first one person $1 billion company, one individual controlling an entire army of AI that's built a huge business. I mean, we're already seeing it with Telegram, which is now each employee in that company is over $100 million. So you're already kind of getting towards this. It's very small, 14 people or something in that company. So I think those cyborgs and centaurs are going to be interesting about how we start to define and how we start to kind of move in those different places. The larger organization is probably going to be a bit more of the latter, the kind of centaur way of working. But I think for those who are extremely comfortable with these technologies, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, they're going to have more of that kind of cyborg way of working.
Why did you pick a centaur as the metaphor for this?
Well, actually, this goes back to, I mean, I have to be kind of careful with this. The cyborg centaur thing, this was that bit in particular, that came out of research from, I think it was Deloitte did some research, and they use those terms as well. I've been using that term centaur for a long time. And I used it because I remember watching something, I think it was with Gary Kasparov when he was beaten by Deep Blue. And he said, like, when he picked himself up again from that, he kind of learned to basically work alongside the AI to help him develop a game. And he talked about this idea. He said it felt like a centaur relationship. I tend to use that centaur, that wording, this half human, half something else, if I'm speaking to European audiences or Asian audiences. In America, I tend not to use that word because it sounds too fancy sometimes. And I use more like the superhero. Actually, this was something that Ron Kaufman and I had a conversation with years ago, but 2007 to 18. I was saying like my idea initially was to call the keynote centaurs. And he said, no, that sounds far too pretentious, far too European. He said, there needs to be something like much more kind of marvelly, so that's where initially super creativity came from, and then super collaboration came from that. So I'm fascinated by this idea of centaurs, which obviously comes from the Stan countries originally, when these horsemen were coming over the plains, Genghis Khan or whoever was coming over the plains, and because they were coming from the east, the sun was to their back. So the people that were attacking thought they looked like horses, half human, half horses. Basically, that's where the centaur idea comes from. And so I just kind of rekindled that idea and using it with humans and machines. And I think you're seeing it in the intellectual work we do, like with generative AI. But I think we're going to see even more with the robotics and like factory workers wearing exosuits, for example, in order to. And I'm actually quite excited about it because it means that we can also get people back into the workforce with certain physical disabilities that previously couldn't have worked, because it's going to give them this new kind of like superhuman like strength as well. So I think it's an interesting area.
Okay. So the mindset shift is firstly sort of identifying who you are. Are you sort of we used to talk about digital natives, but let's say an AI native, a youngster that is brought up, is not afraid of the technology, throws themselves in and leverages them individuals. The centaurs are saying, okay, how do we put a team together? Which bit's human, which bit's not? As you said, any adoption of new technology, there's the initial fear, and then there's the acceptance, and then is finding out what's best in it. Are we still at an early adopter stage, or have we gone beyond that?
It feels, I mean, AI is not new. 1956, AI came about. It's not a new technology in that sense. What has happened recently, though, is data and processing power has been the big drivers, and now higher levels of reasoning with it as well. And I think probably the other thing that happened, and you're going to see this a little bit more in the next few years, is the kind of conversational side, because it's, I mean, I now, like, if I'm trying to, yesterday or 2 days ago, I was in Berlin. I was walking around Berlin, and in the past I might have used Google to like search for things, and now I just have a conversation with the AI on my phone and just say, okay, I've got 3 hours. It knows stuff about me. It knows I'm interested in history. It knows I'm interested in these things, and it knows I'm a vegan. So it immediately, bang, it's organized my itinerary for me, tells me where to walk left, walk right, and it's kind of guiding me around the world. And I think that's the way. So the way that so I'm a Gen X, the way that we're using these tools is a little bit more like a replacement for Google, what we'd have done with Google before. Where the younger generation, much younger generation, are doing, they're almost treating it like that life coach, mentor, sounding board, and it's a kind of different relation. And so they can be more, almost like more open with that in terms of what they're willing to kind of give over to the AI. That poses risks. There's, I think there's going to be risks there as well, and we already start to see that.
So risks such as?
So there's ethical risks. There's risk in that the AI knows you better than perhaps you know yourself, and so it can be made easy for, let's say, me as a brand to influence you to make decisions, or a political movement to make you decide about doing something. So it can, what we call in Russian, they call active measures. I can do active measures on you to make you change your mind about something you want to do.
We already saw that with Cambridge Analytica in 2016 and 2020.
Yeah. The big difference is Cambridge Analytica, these were big companies that were using these tools. Whereas today, anyone has access to these tools, which means that anytime I go into a sales conversation, like I had 2 sales calls today, I will use AI to analyze the psychometrics of the person and persons I'm trying to influence before I ever get on a call with them. So I understand, like, this is how this person likes to be talked to. This is how this person makes decisions. This is how a person thinks. Use this wording as opposed to that wording. So if this is just me, Joe Blogs, using this, that's quite a different thing. That's a different powerful. And then I was talking at a conference recently for the eye care industry. So with the new generation of smart glasses, it means that if I have my smart glasses, I've connected to my CRM, I have facial recognition switched on. Immediately as people are walking into my store, I'm telling you, this is Andrew. This is how he likes to be sold to. This is his ability to spend. He's purchased this product from us before. So there's a lot more kind of data there, which can be abused as well.
Yeah. Just as a matter of interest, what AI do you use on your phone to get you a travel itinerary? Do you just is this ChatGPT, or are you using something else?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT as my main one, and then I also use Gemini as another one that I'll sometimes, they kind of do slightly different things in different ways. And then my team, they use like they use a whole bunch of other ones like Perplexity and other ones that are kind of going on. And then if I'm doing more research based work, I'll use like very refined LLMs for that type of work, because I don't want it going way too broad. I want it doing like meta analysis of stuff. And so Stanford actually has a great tool called Storm, STORM, which is a really good way to do meta-analysis of research in a new area you want to look at. So basically, it does this like PhD level document for you on something, and it's pulling out the research, and it doesn't hallucinate in the same way that other, LLMs do.
Very good. How do you think that leaders have to adjust their mindset now that we have AI agents in the workforce, right? I mean, initially they struggled with vision and strategy and people development and finance, and they were struggling with those things. And now they have this extra level of complexity. What advice have you been giving, or what have you been seeing done well with leadership in this particular space?
So the first thing is we don't want to be the leader who has his assistant print off the emails so he can read them. Back in like 30 years ago, whenever that was all happening. So I would say to every leader, you just need to get your hands into it. If you're not using AI 4 times a day, you don't know anything about AI. Frankly, it's you have to just kind of get in and find it and play with it like any kind of new tool that you'd want to do. And then you need to take a bit of a step back. And so I'm talking about leaders who have like C-suite here. The first thing I would be thinking about is putting some governance in place, especially if you're a publicly traded company, because the AI will start making decisions, maybe as part of a team, human team as well. And from an audit perspective, you need to know how was that decision reached? What was the training data for that as well? Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in really hot water really quickly. So create some kind of governance team, board, however you want to call it, just to kind of think about those nuances about the brand risk. And then I would think about doing a couple of things. One is I almost might create a red team and a blue team for the AI. So the blue team, their job is to look at the current business you have, current processes, and think, how can we use AI to make those more efficient, to make that quicker? But then I would have maybe a red team. Their job is to think about the customer, the consumer. What is our industry going to look like in 5, 10 years? Do we have the AI capabilities in place and the training in place for people to get us to where we go? Do we have the products and services? So you can split things up that way. And then the other thing is I would just make a couple of big, bold bets. Rather than salami slicing everything, I would say, like, in this industry, like, what are the main lead indicators for their industry? And I would go like hard on thinking about how to get really creative at using AI to think about those.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, typically when I think about a red team, I think, let's see how we can break it, right? So the blue team being creative and the red team going, what can go wrong? I mean, that's part of your governance piece. And I always, when I'm coaching C-level leaders, make sure that they can argue both sides of their proposition. And maybe you wouldn't be surprised. You and I come from a sort of a country that debating is part of the process, right?
Yeah.
But so many cannot, could not be on the other side of the debating team. They just don't know until I stretch them to do it.
And that's AI can be great for this, because AI can also with our cognitive biases and our heuristics that we run. So in my case, I have a virtual board of directors, a virtual mastermind using AI. I have like 6 people in my head, and the AI knows who these people are. And anytime I'm working on a project or making a major strategic decision, I use my virtual board of directors to analyze and stress test the idea and tell me where I'm weak. Also, I've taken a whole bunch of personality tests, as probably you have. It knows the data from my personality tests. It knows what my weaknesses are as well. It knows what my strengths are. So it's kind of doing what a good advisor, or good mentors, or good coaches would do in helping you understand like what your strengths and weaknesses are, and where maybe you're missing, where you got a blind spot to something. I was watching a video just yesterday of a senior leader, and she has these 5 other people that she has pretty much other leaders in the organization at the same level as her. And she has created avatars, AI avatars for each of these people. And when she goes to present, in advance of presenting to these people, she basically presents to the virtual people first. And then she gets to hear what the questions are. This person, the CTO, he's a real stickler for this, or this CFO, she's a real, she's going to ask these bunch of questions. So it's kind of what you do in great debate preparation as well. I think AI can be wonderful, a wonderful tool to do that.
So specifically, how have you done that? Have you set up a subroutine within ChatGPT? I don't know quite what the right word is, but you've set up a pre-prompt cheat.
Yes. So different sites have different models, have different ways of doing it. I tend to keep it quite simple. So I've just set it up as a project, and it knows that these are the kind of within this project. It's learning all the time as well. Obviously, with ChatGPT, you can tell it, okay, I'm going to give you a task just now. Don't remember it. So, for example, if you're looking for some new dietary supplements or something, that you maybe don't want it to remember that stuff. But the way that it trains is anytime, in the case of ChatGPT, anytime you copy something and you copy something from ChatGPT, ChatGPT knows this, and it will store that information that you've copied for 30 days, even if you've requested it not to be stored. Because what it's doing is it's training its model. It's recognizing that the fact that you've copied it, it's got more value to you. So we want to serve up James more of this kind of stuff. So you have to be a little bit careful. So in my case, I've just got projects. I folders, essentially the way that I do it. But I know that it's kind of learning everything about me all the time as well. I've given it all my brand guide. I've given it, it knows my website, it knows my social media, it knows the way that I speak. So it has a lot of that information as well. And you could actually absolutely set up little agents to be those other people. That's a really cool way of doing it. You could absolutely do that. I'm kind of just going for the path of least resistance. the simpler way of doing it.
Yeah, well, I've got Marcus Aurelius to keep me stoic, right?
Exactly. In fact, I think I've got Marcus here actually. I've got Marcus there. Yeah.
Very, very good. Okay, so you've been interviewed a lot about this, I'd imagine. What's the question that we should be asking James Taylor, but nobody ever asks you about this topic?
What's going to stay the same? So people will always ask, what's going to change with AI? What's going to be different? And I think almost like a more interesting question is what is going to stay the same? And it could be different in different industries, but you can ask, like in 10 years, we're both speakers, what's going to stay the same in our industry? Like there's going to be tons of changes, there's going to be loads of things, but like what is going to be the same? I still think people will want to go be together and have a transformation in themselves and their team. I still think that. I think that's going to just part of who we are as humans. I think storytelling will still be as important in 10 years' time. We might be using different tools in order to tell it, but the book form might go or it might transform into something else. But storytelling has been around for thousands of years, and it will still be around in 10 years' time anyway. So, and you think about your industry, and I saw Jeff Bezos talk about this the other day with Amazon. He said, in 10 years' time, people are still going to be wanting fast delivery. People are not going to say, actually, I would like that product, but I would just like it delivered a little bit slower. That's not going to happen. So you can build like strategies around the principles, the things that stay the same in your industry. And then that's the things that you can obviously really kind of define. So that's what I find interesting is, and this is different for different companies and organizations and industries, but what is going to stay the same? What is not going to change?
Yeah, that's a good insight, James. It really is. We've done a little bit of name dropping, and we looked at the Klarna. I dropped in Moderna. Who are the companies to watch in terms of super collaboration with AI? Is anybody you've seen doing it well thus far?
There's a couple of companies. I work with a company, they're from Argentina called Globant. They're like an Accenture type of company. And they did some really cool stuff with a Brazilian bank called Bradesco. And basically what happened is this Brazilian bank had created a chat agent called Bia. And very quickly, so Bia knew how to talk about all the different products. It answers about 300,000 questions a day. But very quickly, Bia started being subjected to the same kind of abuse, often sexual in nature, that a human call center staff has to deal with every day. So previously, the way that Bia had been set up and Globant, the engineers had set her up was to respond in a subservient way. So I'm sorry, I'll try to do better. And then the team, and actually Globant has got a lot of female engineers that work at that company. And they went, actually, this is no good, because what happens is if people talk this way to an agent, that can end up then talking, when they eventually speak to a human, they can speak like that as well. And also more broadly in our society. So they changed the algorithm, the training data. And now if someone attempts to demean or abuse Bia, she talks back. So she'll say, don't talk to me like that. She'll even cite articles of Brazilian criminal law as well at them. And I just think that is an ethical, that's a decision we get to make, how we want to design these things. So I think that's cool. That's what they're doing. Another company, in terms of, this is like more teams, how you build teams together, is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE. So they created a really simple way for anyone in the organization to easily submit and volunteer for ideas and initiatives in the organization. So basically, it's an app on people having their phone, 60,000 people that work at HPE. So if you have an idea, maybe for using AI to improve something, you can put forward the idea. It might then recognize like what is the skill set that's going to be required to make that minimum viable product or make that thing happen. And it works like a modern dating app, like Tinder or Grindr, but for ideas. So as you're looking through it, it's like swipe left, swipe right. Well, yeah, I like that idea. I don't like that idea. But here's the really cool thing about it. There's an AI that sits behind it that recognizes what is the perfect combination of team members that are required to make a project successful. So it recognizes that you want to have people with different ways of looking at the world. You want, people with very kind of big thinkers, but you also want people like complete to finisher people as well. And what it does is it basically helps put together those teams around ideas and making those ideas happen. And the fascinating thing that they found happen from it, they found so many hidden figures in the organization. People that kind of sat quietly, were just kind of doing their thing, but had either brilliant idea or were brilliant at executing well on ideas as well. So HPE, I think that's a really good example of a company that's using it in a different way to do what a good leader should be doing, which is understanding how team dynamics work and how to build a great team.
There's two movies that jump to mind here. One I've already referenced in the book, which is Gattaca, 1997, where, because I've talked about human potential and you are not your genes. We express our genes through some choices we make. This is a self-leadership theme. But what jumped out of mind with that one is Moneyball. In that movie, Moneyball, they're using statistical analysis to say, we don't need a star, we need somebody that hits consistently like this. Yeah. And so that my brain thinks in analogies, as does everybody's, I guess. But that was the movie that jumped out with that example. That's a Moneyball, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, like, Frederick, Hara, and I both speak about creativity, and we love ideas, and we're both obsessed with ideas and coming up with ideas and stuff. But we also, I feel very strongly that ideas are worthless unless they're executed upon well. But when you have a great idea and great execution, that's the thing that can transform industries. And so the idea has a certain value, limited value perhaps, but it's the execution. And what do we need for great execution? That's when we need the collaboration piece. Now, whether that's human and humans collaborating or human and machine is what it is. But that's when those things come together and they're done well, that's transformative.
Well, and this is where the AI coach comes in quite well, as you would be aware in my self-leadership model. It's self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-learning. So the AI is good for self-learning, but it's also it's extremely good for that self-regulation. Somebody might have a meeting with their coach once a fortnight or once a month, but what happens on the days that not? And that AI coach is just dropping you self-regulation prompts and nudges, and you can constantly. And so the research is showing you get much more rapid adoption of the behavior change when you have an AI coach for that self-regulation piece.
Yeah. And also, I think the AI can sometimes spot weak signals that maybe a human even can't spot. I mean, there's an app called Kintsugi, which insurance companies are using, and it can spot in 15 seconds or 30 seconds whether someone is under emotional stress or depressed, for example, as well. A lot of people are wearing like these like watches, and that based on the physical movement of someone, you can figure out using AI where that person's at in their head. And so I'm seeing companies now that are using either voice, like what we call ambient AI, voice biomarkers, or physical wearables. And if it's recognizing that person's maybe struggling or whatever, it's being reported back to the head of HR, or it's being reported back to their doctor. And then that doctor calls up and says, "Hey, I noticed that you're going into episode here. Like, we should have a conversation." So I think that's kind of interesting. That gives a whole bunch of new data points, for leaders or for those within HR to think about.
Yeah, but then that borders on the ethical, right? Am I not allowed
Absolutely.
to have a bad day?
Yeah, absolutely. And whose data is that? Like let's say if I go and
Yeah,
work for a company and that company has an amazing AI coach that company subscribes to, and my ability to have access to that coach, but I decide to leave, go to another company. Where does that data go? Does that get data stay in the company? Can I port that data across? Will my decision to go and work at this other company be determined based upon whether I get to take my AI coach with me to this new job, this new role? That's all up for debate and discussion and law, and different countries are going at different paces on that.
the big. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Firstly, let's acknowledge that's a very important point. I mean, the big ethical decision is what happens when we can't see the algorithm anymore, right? Because the
White
AI is
box.
learning so far. You talked about adjusting the algorithm to not be subservient in a Brazilian bank. But what if
Mhm.
I don't know what's baked into the algorithmic bias?
Yeah. So that's why, you need to have explainable AI. You need to be able to have that conversation. You need to be able to look at the code at the deepest level to understand, almost like an audit trail. Why did it make that decision? Now, this isn't a new challenge. There's parts of the world just now that have drones in war zones that are going up to people's houses and going to the window, and the little red light comes on in the drone, and it asks the person, "Why are you so close to the window? Step away from the window." It's already using facial recognition. It knows who you are already. And that decision is a kill or no kill decision that it's making there as well. That's happening today. So that's, when that drone makes that decision to fire that missile because it spots someone through a window who is that's the person it's trying to go for, and it maybe gets the wrong person, that you need to have explainable. Like, that needs to be explained. Like, why did they make that decision? What was the fault in that? And at the moment, there's not a lot of transparency in a lot of companies about about those decisions as well. So that's kind of where we need now, I have a personal opinion on some of these things where I believe that the individual should be sovereign over their own data. So I have my own data, I have my data, and I can give it to a company for a limited amount of time for these uses, for this subsegment of data, and then it comes back to me. Now, using blockchain, this is actually much easier to do today, and we can do this with blockchain. But it's where the companies want to do that, because if someone's not paying for a service, they are the product, and they're being sold, and their data is being sold. And we have an entire economy now that's been built up upon that idea. And that's kind of worrying, because especially when you start to think about, where I just mentioned about these, drones making autonomous decisions about kill and no kill decisions, you have to explain it. I saw yesterday there was a car, it was coming up, it was a autonomous car, and someone fell into the road, and they just fell into the road. And in a second, that car made a decision to go and smash into another car that was coming head on, because it very quickly you calculated the data, said, I'm less likely to kill people in the car than I am to kill that guy that's just fallen on the road. But you have to be able to explain that, because what if the person in the other car was seriously injured? Explainable AI.
Yeah. The question, the worrying thing is that we live in a world that is driven by science, and yet so few people actually understand science, right? I mean, we've seen this with, vaccine denial and all sorts of things. Do we have enough people that can understand the algorithm? If it's going this far, is it going to be a very small percentage of people who are going to have that knowledge, and are they empowered to pull the plug?
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about that. I think people will upskill, they'll reskill, there's a lot of those people around. I'm more concerned about, do people have the right ethics, the kindness, love, in the compassion for our fellow people, more than anything else. I mean, 2 days ago I was speaking in Berlin. I had a few hours left, and I went to a place called Wannsee, which is where it's on this lovely lake, lovely country house. It's kind of the place that you and I would go and give keynotes at conferences, like nice retreats. But 1943 or 42, whenever, that's where the 15 men sat around a table and made the decision about the final solution of the Jews. 8 of them were lawyers. These were all people that had high degrees and everything, very successful in what they were doing, but they were making decisions, very scientific, mathematical decisions with terrible outcomes. So I'm kind of almost like more like the human bit, because these technologies, they're not science, they're not good or bad. It's what we decide to do with them, how we decide to use these technologies. And are we just going to create a better machine that is better at killing people or doing terrible things or making other people disenfranchised in some way? That's the bit. And as you know, Alice and I, we have a keynote program called the Ethical Futurists. And it's a really hard sell, because both companies don't want to talk about ethics. They might have it in their website and their values statements, but to bring in speakers to talk about the importance of ethics, what ethics is, how ethics can work, the questions when you think about making ethical decisions, it feels too much. And maybe that's just because we're in a middle place between, the end of a lot of religious, organized religions, and we're kind of going to a kind of different place, but we're kind of not quite sure where all that sits.
Yeah. Well, the Ten Commandments is not up to the current ethical issues.
Yeah.
I remember when I did my MBA in the 90s, and the professor on information technology said the job of the future is librarian, and we're all like, what? But what they meant was the digital, the curating knowledge was, and a librarian curates knowledge. It's not about keeping books. It is that skill set. But I'm thinking that the job in terms of AI ethics is philosophers. Philosophy was a soft skill, but what you're talking about is the philosophy of some of these algorithms. Does the car run over one person or 3 people? Does the car save the driver, or does it save the person in the road? Those are philosophical questions. And data scientists are not equipped, neither are lawyers, necessarily, to make those philosophical decisions.
Yeah, because those systems are being told to make decisions in certain ways. There is training data there, and so you do have to have that, and you have to then, even if you're saying to the AI, we're going to give you this framework in which to make decisions. We're going to, let's say, imagine you are a Buddhist AI, so you're going to make decisions from a Buddhist perspective, let's say, and so you can give that kind of framework, and that's maybe useful for certain things. But as you get into the really gnarly, kind of detailed stuff, I still think we need that human to be coming back, and also these things aren't fixed. So times move, and attitudes towards certain things move, and so we have to be continually willing and open to debate, discuss, and challenge each other's ideas as well. That's a really important part. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the idea of like safe spaces, as a term. I'm from that more British tradition of wanting to liberal, like challenging people's ideas, even if I fundamentally disagree with the person on the other side. I believe that it's important that we have that open discussion. And I think there's a danger that we get into those kind of ways of excluding conversations and then kind of not really addressing the elephant in the room, because it just feels like it's just too difficult, too hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's, I have medical training, as you know, and so triage is, who can I save, who can I not? And hospital triage is a hospital and a healthcare system, assigns a value to the potential of you staying alive. And, in the UK, you are going to get better care if you have a heart attack than if you have Alzheimer's, right? You're going to get the care because the money spent on addressing your cardiac problem has results. The money spent
Yeah.
on caring for you if you get Alzheimer's has, it has little outcome for the society, only for your comfort towards the end of your life. And those are horrible decisions to make. But hospital administrators and they're making those decisions. It's going to be interesting if AI gets involved in that, because then we're looking at quality of life and length of life and the actuarial decisions that insurance companies are making are going to change.
I mean, I think it already is. It already is happening to a certain extent. Maybe there should always be a human in the loop as to making kind of certain final decisions on things. But the AI can take some of the burden out of doing some of these things, like going through all these decisions and making those kind of calculations. But especially for life and death or quality of life decisions, I think it's human. I think we have to have that the humanity in that as well, as difficult as that is.
Yeah, but you realize you've argued against yourself. You've talked about where those men made those decisions.
Mhm.
I'm reminded of Cipola's 5 laws of stupidity. Is it Cipolla or Cipolla? Cipolla, 5 laws of stupidity, and the first law is that stupidity. There is more stupidity than you think, and the second law, I think, I probably get these out of order, but the second law is that stupidity is not related to intelligence. Stupidity is defined doing harm to yourself and to others. If you just do harm to yourself, well, that's not very bright. But if you do harm to yourself and others, that's stupid. If you do harm to others but not yourself, you're a bandit. And really, what we need is the avoidance of stupidity. And clearly, what happened with the Nazis and the final solution was not linked
No,
to
I mean, I
intelligence.
think which does link to something which is interesting, which is, and this is going a bit more on the philosophical side, so it doesn't relate directly, but there's a big movement now within the part of the technological community of giving rights to AI in the same way that we know that obviously humans and animals have sentience. So kind of elevating AI up to that kind of level. And I mean, I won't get into too much of the details, but in parts of Japan just now, there's a lot of younger men have relationships with AI. There's that famous movie, She, I think it was called, Her, which is like a guy having a relationship with an AI and gave it, that like it was like a person. They felt it was like a person as well. And I think we're already maybe starting to see that a little bit. There's some cases of that kind of starting to go on just now. And in fact, there was another one, which is another area, which is I think is fascinating, which is they're now able to start using AI to be able to have us understand what birds and whales are actually saying, and almost like then have conversations and flip the AI around using that training data. And someone came up with a really good thing, but I said, okay, so we can understand what the whales are saying and we can speak to the whales, but would we even listen? Because already there's people in our communities, humans, we don't listen to. So you're assuming then people think, okay, we can use AI to talk to animals and maybe AI send us, but would we even listen? And once again, that goes back to the human bit again. So I think that's the German example I was giving there with that final solution was it was not a failure of it was not a failure of intelligence. These were very intelligent people. Mentioned like the stupidity thing there. I think it was values of ethics, human values, doing what was right and understanding what was right from what was wrong as well. And AI doesn't really help us there.
No, it doesn't. So the final question, because we're running out of time here, but I think it's one of recognizing that in the 1940s that stupidity and evil was done. Is AI evolving at a greater pace than our own humanity and ethics and maturity? Is it going to outstrip us? Is this the problem?
Yes, it probably will in our lifetime. Definitely in our lifetime, will outstrip us in terms of intelligence and reasoning abilities. I've got no doubt about that. Um, I talk about creativity as well. And so people say, well, will AI get to the levels of human creativity and what's that and beyond? And I said, it will. But I don't feel threatened by that in the same way I don't feel threatened by collaborating with a really creative person. They elevate me. They make me think about it differently in a way as well. So I'm fine about that. As we go, a few years ago, I did a conference, and I was actually the MC of the conference, and one of the other speakers was Steve Wozniak, and we were speaking about this idea on stage, and he talked about it as the house cat problem. He said, as these machines become smarter and smarter, he said we'll end up becoming like the house cat of AI. Now, it was, yeah, I have a cat. My cat has an amazing life. It has a fantastic life. It gets fed, it gets a nice home, stuff. It's got the cat, really, but I still keep it around because it entertains me. So in the future, will AI just keep us around? Because we're kind of like the house cats. We're entertaining. We do kind of silly stuff. It gets us a bit of a laugh from it as well. Doesn't really need us around, but it treats us really, really well. So maybe that's where we're going.
Yeah, that's an interesting visual. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for joining us on Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. If you're ready to be the driver of your life and not the passenger, keep exploring with us. Get your copy of Potentialize wherever good books are sold. For more resources or to book Andrew for coaching and speaking engagements, visit selfleadership.com. Until next time, think smart, lead better, and always potentialize your future.